Hey everyone, welcome to this week's session of the Staff Engineers Path Book Club. This week we're going to be discussing chapter 6, which is Why Have We Stopped? And it kind of goes over a variety of different ways that people get blocked on big projects, and then also different ways that people might get lost along the way and get stuck on big projects. So I'll kick it off with the first question here and first item to discuss. And so I'm just kind of curious in general, what ways have you seen projects or people get blocked at GitLab? And how have you seen staff plus folks get involved with resolving those problems?
I think the biggest place that I see this happen is when like the answer of what to do is not clear. Like if the situation is like, oh yeah, we have a doc for that, done, easy. When it's like, yeah, but there's nothing written down. Someone has to figure it out. Like the theme in this book is if you use that word someone, it's you. So it's that staff engineer recognizing, oh yeah, obviously no one knows what to do here. So if no one knows what to do, someone has to figure it out and it'll be me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I've seen as well. When I've seen some big projects stall out, it's usually I think one of the biggest reasons I've seen is like kind of waiting on another team, which was one of the main reasons brought up in the book. And that's always due to like misaligned priorities or misunderstanding. And yeah, I see the staff engineer eventually just kind of steps up and starts the discussion with the other team or finds out what needs to happen in order for each person to move forward. So that makes a lot of sense that it really just comes down to like who is that person.
I almost feel like it's not always like the staff plus that necessarily solves it. Because obviously there are times when you have to involve other teams. Sometimes it's access, sometimes it's like just even Stan doesn't know everything, right? So I think what's interesting, my experience, a little bit of what I'm hearing is that it's often a staff plus that kind of steps in to kind of pull everything together, and kind of pull all those loose threads that might be hanging together to then tie it into something that we can move forward with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that the bigger the project, like it's the wider spread the strings are that need to get pulled together. So that's definitely a common theme. All right. Does anyone have some other points that they wanted to chat about or bring up from this chapter? If not, I can probably add one or two more.
I just want to build on what Cynthia said. I think this is something important. Like it doesn't have to be the staff engineer that does it. You're right, it doesn't. Often, depending on the size of it, those are the people who it's like less scary have done it more. It's less scary to say, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring this all together and make some decisions. But I think part of growing into that staff role is bias for action means like anyone can be the person that sees something and says something. And I think it's important to just make it not be oh, you have to have this kind of a title to be a problem solver and just get the thing done.
I think that's even more true here in our async culture too, because any delay will mean another day or 2 days or something like that. Whereas like if we were in an office together, I might just walk over to you and talk to you if I wasn't getting a response, or call you, or all those things, and that's not as common here. So I do think it's kind of like sending an email in the past where I might send an email and ask everybody their opinion and send it to like an email group. And you know how that goes. You don't get a response half the time, right? So you have to pinpoint someone. So it's the same type of concept in my mind is if you need an action, and especially here, when I ask someone something, I'll more readily go down the path of suggesting something and say, I'm going this route, and ask them to stop me instead of asking and waiting for that feedback if I think that's the path to go.
That's similar to the wrong is better than vague sentiment from the previous chapter, which I like very much.
I'm also hearing like, as long as it's a two-way door decision, like that's just how we do things here. That's the right thing.
I'm scared of saying things that are right. I'm just about saying this is the path that I've found success with more frequently.
Ben, did you want to verbalize your point there?
Yeah, so my take on it to some extent is from support, where we've not had that many staff support engineers. RT's obviously present with us, but the previous or the other two staff support engineers, but also the previous two, I think were more, particularly on self-managed, were much more deeply technical. And I was trying to think about the way, for want of a better phrase, that they would be used when there's a difficult customer situation going on. And actually, where I kind of ended up with it is that, if you've got a customer with a kind of ongoing major performance issues or whatever, and they've got big incident management bridge going on and senior management involved, if you assign a staff support engineer to that, it shows a level of commitment by GitLab equivalent to what the customer's providing. They've got senior management involved, we've got senior engineers involved. Kind of the book touched on that in terms of the way staff engineers map to people managers, but it's just a different angle on it. And actually, in that respect, it wouldn't matter whether or not that staff engineer is able to actually fix the problem at hand. It's just about something different, politics, for want of a better word.
Optics.
Yeah.
I will say, I will feel like I've also been on the other, like I've been the one blocking a project before. Not the, reading this chapter specifically reminded me of a time at a previous position and company where I was kind of made aware of this decision record, RFC, designed architectural document to build a new system for audit logs. And I was on the team that was supporting audit logs. And so I knew that we had insufficiently staffed our existing, service. We had tons of feature requests that we hadn't been able to fill from customers. And then kind of somebody from outside had just come in and been like, but what if we built a whole new thing and it had all of the features and it's like, it's going to be amazing. And I was the one like, okay, but like, who's going to do it? And like, are you aware that we already have this system that we haven't properly invested in? And maybe that's why people are unhappy with our current offering. And like, I guess I've seen kind of the result of, I don't know what it's called, when someone kind of just plops in with zero context and it's like, here's a plan. What if you all just did this? And you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm not gonna just kind of adopt this plan because you clearly don't have all of the context for, the challenges we've been dealing with, usually related to like just investment, right, in current systems. So, yeah.
Yeah, how do you go about communicating that in a nicest way possible? Let's put it that way.
I don't know. I mean, I think in that case, my memory is that I just, I mean, I definitely attended the architecture working group where that RFC was discussed, and made sure that the point was made that we actually do have an auto log system. It just, you know, is kind of sitting here waiting for someone to pay attention to it. But basically I never saw that project go anywhere because it would have had to have been my team to have built it, right? It would have been me to have started building it. And I mean, I think this kind of goes back to the previous chapters on planning projects where it's like, if you don't have the proper organizational support for something to start with, it's going to be hard to just like convince a group of engineers to work on it. But on the other hand, it's possible that I, as an IC, didn't have the proper context. Like maybe there was like a very valid custom reason that this needed to happen. A key customer like needed some feature set that was going to be impossible with our current architecture. So it's possible that I should have done more context digging to figure out like why this was coming out of nowhere.
I too have felt that, where it's not like really a I won't call it a they're stepping on your turf. I wouldn't call it that, or but it's like all those types of anxiety inducing things. I believe when you initially get something, you feel like how could have it been approached to you in a way where you might have accepted it easier, or just maybe, I mean, is there something there where the person could have approached it differently, maybe had a one-on-one? I'm just using it just because you brought up the example, one-on-one with you, or is it something that you need to change about yourself? You know, I mean, how you take these things. I don't, you know, I'm torn on these things sometimes.
I've worked in a lot of organizations where you certainly have to, I would say, seed the idea for big changes before actually proposing it in a large room. I feel like we don't need to do that as much at GitLab, where if, you know, someone does propose a big thing that we can, I think it's kind of a little bit of both. So like you want to understand, you want to, you know, assume positive intent, and that like, you know, they may have a reason or rationale, like Jesse said, maybe like you just don't have all the context, maybe they didn't put it in there for one reason or another. And then so I find that the most useful thing is just to ask questions, right? Like to just ask like, you know, whether things like whether they had looked at the existing one, what was missing, or what was like, why that wouldn't work, you know. So it's just kind of digging in a bit more by asking the right questions, I think can be very valuable.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to a lot of what was described in the last chapter about like leading a big project. There's, you know, a big list of like, if you want everyone to buy into this project, you pretty much need all of these boxes checked, and there's a lot of them. And so this is almost kind of seeing it from the other side, where someone comes to you without all of the boxes checked, and like what's the right way to respond. And I think that's, yeah, asking questions and you know, assuming positive intent and all of that is definitely like makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think that key there is assuming positive intent. I think we all have history in less welcoming cultures of companies where that isn't always the case, or maybe it is, but it's like mixed in corporate politics and it gets a little messy. And here it's very much assume a positive intent. And I think I found that to be true.
also found that, I don't know if it always helps, but maybe people who work with me on the team, like Bree and Ben, can tell me. There are times when I've created an issue and then assigned myself because I know that I have the ability to do it. But because of competing priorities, things might not get done in a very short timeline. So I usually either in the description or in the first comment will like explicitly say, right, if someone else wants to work on it or has interest to work on it, either they can take over the assignment, just, you know, or if they want someone to support them in making the change, that I'm happy to kind of pair with them or be a mentor or coach or whatever it is in getting that change done. So whether that's code or process or whatever, sometimes the process ones are even more complicated than the code. Right? So regardless of what the change is and what the issue is, so I try to be very explicit about some things. In some cases, there's so much context and history around it that it's very difficult for someone else to take it on. But so I try to be very explicit on like, here's an issue that anyone could take on, and I'd be happy to pair with someone. Other times I assign to myself, and I will sometimes say like, the issue description might be a bit bare because there's just a lot of context that I'm not writing down.
I've been in that situation too, where I have what I think are great ideas or things like that. I have the time to write the issue, but I don't have the time. I don't feel I have the time or the desire at the moment to write out all the domain context that I have in my head. And that's, I don't know if that's bad, and I don't know if it's good. It's just what it is sometimes, I think, too.
I mean, I think the awareness is really good. Like the fact that you're aware that you have some sort of knowledge or level of understanding that you know other people won't just get when you tell them. I think that's very good awareness. So that's sort of like the first like aspect, and then if you wanted to improve upon that, you can kind of like almost retro on like, how did I gain all this domain knowledge? Like, what could I have done to, put this somewhere over the past month, year, entire time with the company, so that it's not just in my head. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Try to point to past issues, but then you might end up in a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's like once you figure out that rabbit hole, you forgot that you're like, it's too late because you forgot to write it down while you're going down the rabbit hole. So it's like almost impossible to get yourself down that spot again and write it out.
I think about this topic a lot. Like, how do we create and maintain that domain knowledge, like as we're going along, rather than waiting and needing to do it later? Does anyone have like, and on one hand, the issues being a rabbit hole, I'm like, yeah, that's too bad. But also, life is messy. It kind of is, it's a rabbit hole because we haven't solved the problem yet. Does anyone have like good partial solutions?
Well, I've been dog fooding the wiki lately. I know we're handbook first and all that stuff, but sometimes I feel like some things are just, I need to throw this information somewhere so I don't forget it. And it may not be true tomorrow, but it may be true and I need to reference it. And so I've been using in my team, we have a growth group in GitLab itself, and I put a wiki there, and I just started dumping things like, I mean, it's silly little things like how to reproduce steps locally that you have to like put in merge requests a lot to get it reviewed. And it's like, well, I've referenced that 100 times. I'm usually searching for that across many different things. And I'm like, it doesn't really feel like a handbook item, but it's something I want on the tip of my fingers and something other people in my team could use for like domain knowledge and things like that. And so I'll dump that in the wiki, just a link to the merge request, instructions basically.
Yeah, I've definitely done similar. Like I had a repo that was like my own set of notes, and then I found myself sharing them and realized like that shouldn't be my project. That should be my group's project. So I ended up just putting them in the docs. So there are like a handful of pages of just my personal notes, kind of hidden in the developer docs, which it is tricky though, because with those types of notes, they can get outdated very quickly and or get neglected very quickly. So I'm not sure of another solution where that is better. Like I like the slight informality of the wiki, but it's also good to make things as discoverable as possible.
I think it kind of depends on what the knowledge is, so to speak, that like we're trying to capture. I've actually found here's a better place to put this or like whatnot, but in support we have a training project, and we've tried to put together training modules to get support team members kind of at least above, like to a certain level of knowledge in a particular topic. And in there, we've included links to deep dives, actually not just from within support, but also from the development team. Actually really love Jesse and Imre did a lunch and learn, which in a way was kind of similar. It was more scoped to a very specific piece of what auth is working on, and less, I would say, what I would call domain knowledge, but it was very similar to a deep dive in a lot of ways. And I have actually found a lot of those useful. There are times when support has been really struggling with a topic, for example, and we've actually asked a development team member to do a deep dive for us, which of course we would then record and just put on unfiltered. We would do it from our training, but of course it's just open to anyone at GitLab to attend and watch afterwards. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like Stan used to do office hours as well, where he would dig in. I think he found those unscalable, but he's kind of moved to doing things like blog posts or things that are similar to that. And I've found those really useful. I think it's finding a way to share the knowledge in a way that is consumable and also scalable for the person doing it. I don't know where that balance exactly is.
The blog posts are helpful and they're kind of nice because you can look at the date and use that to, like Steve's point about like things get neglected. It was written in 2021. Use that context in your brain to figure out how much of this you consider to be gospel and how much you like use other information to supplement.
All right. Well, I think we are just about at time here. So if nobody has any other points they wanted to discuss, then we can end it here. But thanks everyone for joining. And next week we're moving to section 3, which is all about leveling up and helping others grow. So look forward to getting into that with all of you.